Hello, everybody. This is Minden Segít podcast, and we are sitting here on the World Adaptation Forum 2025. And I'm happy to announce that I'm here with Iñigo Capellán-Pérez, who's Principal Investigator at the University of Valladolid. He's an industrial engineer with a double degree from the University of Valladolid and some arts en métier, France. He is Master in Electrical Engineering and Sustainable Development, and he is PhD in Economics, Development and Application of Environmental Integrated Assessment Modeling towards Sustainability at the University of the Basque Country.
Yes.
Thank you. I have one very important question for you to start with, which is, what do you think, what is the biggest challenge humanity has to face as a civilization right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, in my opinion, it's not, let's say, like one challenge or a couple, several couple challenges which interact together. I will say that they are the environmental crisis. Mm-hmm. One. Second is the resource crisis. And third one will be more on the societal side, everything related with inequalities and democracy. So if we start, for example, about the state of environment, the physical science is really authoritative on this and has showed that we have crossed many planetary boundaries. In the last update, I think 6 out of 9. Planetary boundary is a dimension of the biosphere which is very important for its well-functioning, to be balanced, to be functional. And if it is disturbed, then this by itself will create problem, but it also translates into other dimensions of the biosphere. One typical example is climate change, biodiversity loss, water, biogeochemical flows, etc. So the state of nature at global level is very, very bad, and the trends are worsening. This is related with the other crisis, which is the resource crisis, because why are we disturbing so much the behavior, normal behavior of the biosphere? Because we have a social metabolism, of socioeconomic metabolism, which uses as inputs resources which can be renewable or non-renewable. We process them, and all the pollution and ecological damage that we produce while we consume it for producing goods and services, then is damaging the biosphere. In terms of resources, it's also well known all the peaks of fossil fuels, which are not anymore theory but facts. All the countries are reaching their peak one by one, and now the situation seems a bit more stable or less worrying than in the past, because the United States has managed to do the fracking revolution, and this is something that people working in peak oil didn't foresee. But we must be aware that the United States has very particular conditions for who make possible this extraction, and this will not last forever. So we have to keep in mind that still the world depends at 85% on fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we have renewables, which are on the rise, but also have their limitations, especially to scale up to the level of substituting the fossil fuels. And then we have also metals, materials. And the third part of this component of this polycrisis is related with the society. And for me, I will highlight globally 2 issues. The problem of inequality. There is discussions if the inequality is improving or not improving, but I mean, the progress, if there is any, is not huge. We see within countries and between countries that today still inequalities are huge. And then democracy, I think, is the other point. In the last years, there is a degradation of democracy, especially with the surge of political parties that, we could call them extreme right, Trumpists, like they are not based on facts, they are just based on ideology, and they are gaining a lot of power. So this is undermining the potential solutions that should be or could exist to try to solve the other problems, more physical, let's say, biophysical, economics problems that I mentioned.
Yeah, all these things you mentioned, it seems to me that if humanity goes on with an approach it has done until now, probably there is not the technological invention or trick of energy that's going to save us, as it appears to me. The inequality and ideologies that just abandon common sense and they go against facts, these are things that cannot be solved, in my opinion, with technology or otherwise something physical. So the way I see it and the experience we've gathered in the last 3.5 years through talking to scientists like yourself and many others here on the forum, I've come to realize that whatever we say, we can find out what we should do. But if we don't really honestly look into ourselves and dedicate ourselves to a real path that could make the world better through, or by trying these complex things you've been mentioning, then I think we just have no chance. And I worry that humanity is just not willing to be as honest to itself as it should be. So I ask you, what do you think the first steps should be that are real steps to be executed in order, just only to step on the path of the right thing?
Okay. Yes, you have mentioned many things. I think the first step will be to really understand what is the situation. Because in order to have a plan for action, you need to have a diagnosis. And currently, in my opinion, the diagnosis at, let's say, a society level, if you ask people, is you can have very, very different diagnoses. So that's the root, that there are different, that you want to call strategies or attitudes. Because if the diagnosis is, first, there can be a diagnosis, there is not a problem. This is negationist, so let's continue doing business as usual. So it's very simple. Of course, we could go deeper into psychological factors, no? Because there are studies that show that people say they don't know, but they know, but something a bit unconscious, or you want to keep this below the carpet because you feel uncomfortable. No, well, okay, I don't want to maybe enter. There are colleagues which are psychologists here, but it's a fact that the attitude is, the perception is no problem. And then you can have on the other extreme people who think the collapse will happen tomorrow. No, and in between you have all the gray colors that you want. So first thing will be to have a diagnosis. In my opinion, we do have a diagnosis. The problem is that this diagnosis is contrary to the system in which we live. The diagnosis, in fact, I think was already done in the general terms already 50 years ago with the limits to growth. Limits to growth showed, you mentioned technology, limits to growth showed that improvement in technology, in efficiency, for example, only delays the problem. And this makes sense because if you are polluting 100 and instead of 100 you start polluting 90, the accumulated pollution at some point will be the same. So you are delaying the problem. Why you are delaying the problem? Because our system based on growth transforms all the efficiencies improvements into more growth or more demand, which is also called rebound effect. So without a system change which does not depend on economic growth for providing well-being and stability, I think that In my opinion, this is the first step. Another question is how to do that, because now we are in a system, if there is no growth, everything works very bad. Fortunately, there is quite a lot of research on post-growth and degrowth. Even the European Commission and governments are starting to finance research with quite a lot of money, this type of ideas. Also, the question is, we don't have how much time do we have, because we cannot now study 50 years and then implement something. My opinion is that I'm very aligned with post-normal science in the sense that there is a lot of uncertainty about the future. I mentioned physical factors, social factors, they interact. There is also uncertainty because as scientists, we don't know everything at 100% certainty. There are many things which we have no idea. Tipping points is one classical example. So we are in an area of uncertainty, but we need to plan for a system change. How to do that? I think it should be through an adaptive process in which, okay, you have some general ideas about what to do, you try, and then you see if you measure, quantify, assess, and if it makes sense, you can go further. And if it's not, you need to change the strategy. In this sense, my expertise is with modeling, simulations. So I really think models can help, because models can help you testing in a computer before you implement in a country, or which can have, if you fail in a model, better than if you fail with real situation, people, resources. This doesn't mean that if the model in the model works perfectly, that it will work perfectly in the reality, because maybe in the process of model construction you have overlooked some factors, you have neglect, you didn't have the accurate information, whatever. But if with implementation in reality you get more information, you can fit the model, you can update, and you can reduce. So I think this iterative process will be a way forward. I'm not saying that we should base at all everything on models. I'm just saying, because it's my expertise, that there can be one tool among others.
All right. One very short last question. Do you think we live in a real special time, or is it just like any other time, and like people always think that they're living in a special time?
I think there is a bit of that, no? You can think in the 50s, Cold War, everybody was thinking that there was going to be a nuclear war at any moment. Second World War or First World War, I don't need to explain. Great Depression. The Roman Empire also, when you read the crisis all the time. So I think, there was never a calm period, but it's true that it's the first time that these conditions affect so many people at the same time because of globalization. So maybe before there was some problem. First World War was more in Europe. Or Roman Empire was, of course, in the Roman Empire. In America, they didn't care, or they didn't knew they existed. So now it's more coupled. So the risk of domino effects, I think the risks maybe are higher because of this amplification potential.
Okay. Iñigo, thanks. Thank you. Thanks for talking.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.